The dust-laden wind carried Eleanor Grace Cooper's sobs across the desolate prairie road. Her plump frame huddled against a gnarled oak tree as the family wagon disappeared over the horizon, taking with it the last vestiges of the only life she had ever known. At 19 years old, she had been abandoned like unwanted cargo, her father's final words still burning in her ears. "You're nothing but a burden, eating us out of house and home." The year was 1875, and the promise of a new life in California had been Eleanor's dream too, until her family decided her size would slow them down on the arduous journey west. So here she sat, 10 miles outside of Council Bluffs, Iowa, with nothing but a small carpetbag containing a change of clothes, her mother's tarnished hand mirror, and provisions that would last 3 days at most. Eleanor wiped her tear-stained cheeks with the sleeve of her faded blue dress, which strained against her ample figure. The setting sun cast long shadows across the grasslands, and the realization of her predicament settled in her chest like a stone. Night would fall soon, and she had nowhere to go. She didn't hear the approaching hoofbeats until they were nearly upon her. Startled, Eleanor scrambled to her feet, her heart pounding with fear. A lone rider appeared, silhouetted against the amber sky. He pulled his chestnut stallion to a halt several paces from where she stood. "Miss, are you all right?" His voice was deep, tinged with concern. Eleanor stared up at him, embarrassment washing over her. The stranger dismounted in one fluid motion, and she took an instinctive step backward. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with a face weathered by sun and wind, yet handsome in a rugged way. His eyes, the color of summer sky, regarded her with genuine concern beneath the brim of his worn leather hat. I'm fine," she lied, her voice betraying her as it cracked with emotion. The man's gaze traveled down to her carpetbag, then back to her tear-streaked face. "Doesn't look that way to me, miss." He removed his hat, revealing dark blonde hair that curled slightly at the nape of his neck. "Name's Caleb Grant. I run the Double G Ranch about 5 miles yonder." He gestured eastward with his hat. Eleanor hesitated, years of warnings about strange men flooding her mind. But something in his steady gaze made her trust him despite her better judgment. "Eleanor Cooper," she offered quietly. "Pleased to meet you, Miss Cooper." "Now, if you don't mind my asking, what's a young lady doing out here alone with night coming on?" Eleanor's chin trembled as she fought back fresh tears. "My family. They left me. They're heading to California, and they said—" Her voice faltered. "They said I'd slow them down. That I eat too much and—" She gestured helplessly at her substantial form. Caleb's expression darkened, his jaw tightening as he looked down the empty road. "They just left you here, with nothing but that bag," Eleanor nodded, shame coloring her cheeks. Caleb was silent for a long moment, then placed his hat back on his head with deliberate slowness. "Well, Miss Cooper, I can't in good conscience leave you out here alone. My sister Martha runs the house at the ranch. You're welcome to come back with me, get a hot meal and proper shelter for the night. Tomorrow we can figure things out." Eleanor blinked in surprise. "You do that for a stranger?" A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Out here, folks look after each other. It's the only way to survive." He extended his hand. "What do you say?" Eleanor looked at his outstretched palm, calloused and strong. In that moment, she realized she had no choice but to trust this man. What awaited her otherwise was a night alone on the prairie, vulnerable to the elements and whatever dangers lurked in the darkness. "Thank you, Mr. Grant," she said, accepting his hand. Caleb lifted her carpetbag as though it weighed nothing and secured it to his saddle. Then, with surprising gentleness, he helped Eleanor mount the horse before swinging up behind her. The animal shifted under their combined weight, but Caleb patted its neck reassuringly. Easy, Thunder. We'll take it slow. Eleanor sat rigid, acutely aware of the stranger at her back, his arms reaching around her to hold the reins. No man had ever been this close to her before, and despite her circumstances, she felt her face flush with heat that had nothing to do with the setting sun. "Hold on," Caleb instructed, his breath warm against her ear. As they rode across the prairie, the first stars appeared in the deepening blue of the sky. Eleanor found herself wondering what tomorrow would bring, and whether she had made the right choice in trusting this kind cowboy who had found her crying by the road. The Double G Ranch emerged from the twilight like a haven, a modest but well-maintained two-story house, flanked by a large barn and several outbuildings. Light spilled from the windows, and smoke curled from the chimney, promising warmth within. As they approached, a woman appeared on the porch, wiping her hands on her apron. She shaded her eyes against the last rays of sunlight, her posture straightening with surprise as she spotted Eleanor. "Caleb Grant, what have you brought home this time?" she called, though her tone held more curiosity than accusation. Caleb dismounted and helped Eleanor down with strong, steady hands. "Martha, this is Miss Eleanor Cooper. She needs our help." Martha Grant was a slender woman in her early 30s, with the same sky-blue eyes as her brother, and hair the color of wheat pulled back in a practical bun. She assessed Eleanor with a quick, shrewd glance that took in everything from her tear-stained face to her road-dusty clothes. "Well, don't just stand there, bring her inside," Martha said, her expression softening. "Poor thing looks like she's been through the ringer." Eleanor found herself ushered into a warm kitchen that smelled of freshly baked bread and stew. Martha sat her at a sturdy wooden table and placed a steaming mug of coffee before her, while Caleb disappeared to tend to his horse. "Drink up," Martha encouraged. "Then you can tell me what happened if you're of a mind to." The coffee was strong and sweet, warming Eleanor from the inside out. By the time Caleb returned, she had shared her story with Martha, whose expression had grown increasingly thunderous. "Some people don't deserve to be called parents," Martha declared, placing a generous bowl of beef stew in front of Eleanor. "Leaving their own flesh and blood by the roadside like unwanted baggage. It's unconscionable, Martha," Caleb warned, washing his hands at the basin by the door. "Miss Cooper's been through enough without reliving it." Martha pressed her lips together but nodded. "You're right." "I'm sorry, Eleanor. Eat your fill. There's plenty more where that came from." Eleanor hesitated, her parents' constant criticism about her appetite ringing in her ears. Caleb seemed to sense her discomfort as he sat across from her. "You need your strength," he said quietly. "And Martha takes it as a personal insult if folks don't appreciate her cooking." A small smile tugged at Eleanor's lips, the first since her abandonment. "It smells wonderful," she admitted, lifting her spoon. The stew was rich and flavorful, the meat tender, the vegetables perfectly cooked. Eleanor couldn't remember the last time she'd eaten something so delicious. Despite her self-consciousness, she finished the entire bowl and accepted a second helping when Martha offered. After dinner, Martha showed Eleanor to a small but comfortable bedroom upstairs. "It's not much," Martha apologized, "but it's clean and the mattress is soft." "It's perfect," Eleanor assured her, overwhelmed by the kindness these strangers had shown her. "There's a nightgown in the chest that should fit you," Martha continued, lighting a lamp on the bedside table. "It was our mother's, and you'll find washing things on the dresser. Breakfast is at sunrise, but take your time coming down. You've had a trying day." Left alone, Eleanor unpacked her meager belongings and changed into the offered nightgown. It was made of soft cotton, simply cut but far nicer than anything she'd owned. She brushed out her long golden brown hair, studying her reflection in the spotted glass above the dresser, Her face was round, her cheeks flushed from crying and the warmth of the house. Her eyes, a deep green that her mother had once called her only beauty, stared back at her with uncertainty. What would become of her now? Eleanor crawled into bed, expecting sleep to elude her. But the events of the day had drained her completely, and she drifted off to the distant sound of Caleb and Martha's voices from below, discussing her fate in hushed tones. Morning arrived with the crowing of a rooster, and the smell of coffee and bacon wafting up the stairs. Eleanor dressed quickly in her spare dress, which was slightly less worn than the one she'd traveled in, and made her way downstairs. Martha was at the stove, flipping pancakes, while Caleb sat at the table, reading a newspaper. He stood when Eleanor entered, a gesture of courtesy that took her by surprise. "Good morning, Miss Cooper," he said. "I trust you slept well, better than I expected to," Eleanor admitted. "And please call me Eleanor." "Eleanor, then," he agreed with a nod. "Sit down and have some breakfast. We've got a lot to talk about." Over a hearty meal that made Eleanor's previous family breakfast seem meager by comparison, Caleb outlined his proposal. Martha could use help around the house and with the garden, he explained. "And I've been thinking about expanding the chicken operation, maybe adding some dairy cows. That would be your domain if you're interested." Eleanor stared at him, fork suspended halfway to her mouth. "You're offering me a job to stay here, room, board, and a small wage," Caleb confirmed. "It's not charity," he added quickly, seeming to sense her pride. "We need the help and you need a place. Seems like a fair arrangement to me." Eleanor looked to Martha, who nodded encouragingly. "I've been asking Caleb for help for months," she said. "Too much work for one person, especially with the ranch hands to feed." I don't know what to say," Eleanor stammered. "Say yes," Martha suggested with a smile. "At least until you figure out what you want to do next. Council Bluffs is growing, but there aren't many opportunities for a young woman on her own." Eleanor considered her options, which were admittedly few. She had no other family, no skills that would earn her a living in town, and barely enough money to last a week at a boarding house. "Yes," she said finally. "Thank you. I'll work hard, I promise." Caleb's smile transformed his face, erasing the lines of worry and making him look younger. "That's settled then. Welcome to the Double G, Eleanor Cooper." The first few days at the ranch passed in a blur of new routines and responsibilities. Martha taught Eleanor the rhythms of the household, when to start bread rising, how to manage the laundry for the ranch hands, and the proper way to preserve the garden's bounty for the coming winter. To Eleanor's surprise, Martha never commented on her size or her appetite, instead encouraging her to eat her fill and take breaks when needed. It was a stark contrast to her family's constant criticism, and Eleanor found herself relaxing in this new environment where her worth wasn't measured by the inches of her waistline. Caleb was often absent during daylight hours, riding out at dawn to check on cattle or mend fences with his small crew of ranch hands. But he returned each evening, washing up before dinner and joining the women at the table. He spoke little, but Eleanor often caught him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite decipher. A week into her stay, Eleanor was hanging laundry in the yard when Caleb approached, leading a gentle-looking bay mare. "Thought you might like to learn to ride," he said, patting the horse's neck. "This is Penny. She's steady as they come, perfect for a beginner." Eleanor eyed the mare nervously. "I don't know, Mr. Grant, Caleb," he corrected. "And everyone should know how to ride out here. It's the only practical way to get around." "I'm too heavy," Eleanor blurted out, her cheeks burning. "I'll hurt the horse." Caleb's expression remained neutral, but his eyes softened. "Nonsense. Penny here has carried ranch hands twice your size without complaint. She's as sturdy as they come." He held out the reins. At least give it a try. Something in his quiet confidence gave Eleanor courage. She secured the last sheet to the line and approached cautiously. Penny snuffled at her hand in greeting. "She likes you," Caleb observed. "Now, put your left foot in the stirrup, grab the saddle horn and swing your right leg over." With Caleb's guidance and a considerable amount of awkward scrambling, Eleanor found herself seated in the saddle, heart racing with a mixture of fear and exhilaration. "I did it," she breathed, gripping the saddle horn tightly. "You sure did," Caleb agreed, a rare, full smile lighting his face. "Now, let's get you comfortable with the basics." For the next hour, he led Penny around the corral, teaching Eleanor how to sit properly, how to hold the reins, and the subtle communications between rider and horse. By the time they finished, Eleanor's muscles ached, but a new sense of accomplishment filled her chest. "We'll practice again tomorrow," Caleb promised as he helped her dismount. His hands lingered at her waist a moment longer than necessary, and their eyes met briefly before he turned away to unsaddle Penny. Eleanor watched him work, noticing the play of muscles beneath his shirt, the careful gentleness with which he treated the horse. This was a man unlike any she had known before, steady, kind, and devoid of the cruel judgment she had grown up with. That night, as she lay in bed, Eleanor realized she hadn't thought of her family all day. Instead, her mind was filled with images of Caleb's smile and the feeling of his hand steadying her on the horse. She fell asleep with a warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with the summer heat. The weeks began to blend together as summer ripened into early autumn. Eleanor's days took on a pleasant rhythm. Mornings spent helping Martha with household tasks, afternoons tending to the newly expanded chicken coop, or assisting with the 3 dairy cows Caleb had purchased. He had built a small cheese-making shed adjacent to the barn, and Eleanor discovered she had a knack for turning milk into creamy, delicious cheese that Martha declared was the best she'd ever tasted. Riding lessons continued, and Eleanor progressed from the corral to short excursions around the property. Caleb was a patient teacher, never showing frustration when she made mistakes, always ready with encouragement when she succeeded. "You're a natural," he told her one crisp September afternoon as they rode along the creek that marked the eastern boundary of the Double G. "Penny adores you." Eleanor patted the mare's neck affectionately. "The feeling is mutual. I never thought I'd enjoy riding so much." "There's nothing like the freedom of it," Caleb agreed. "Being able to go where you want when you want." A shadow crossed Eleanor's face. "I never had much freedom before, my family." She trailed off, the wound of their abandonment still fresh despite the passing weeks. Caleb guided his horse closer to hers. "Some people can't see past their own narrow view of the world," he said quietly, "but their blindness isn't your burden to carry." Eleanor looked at him in surprise. In the golden light of late afternoon, with his hat pushed back and his expression earnest, Caleb Grant was the most handsome man she had ever seen. Something fluttered in her chest, a feeling she dared not name. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." His eyes held hers for a long moment. "You've earned your place here, Eleanor. Don't ever doubt that." They rode back to the ranch in comfortable silence, the setting sun painting the prairie in shades of gold and amber. Eleanor found herself stealing glances at Caleb, wondering if he could possibly see her as anything more than a charity case, an employee. The idea seemed preposterous. Men like Caleb Grant didn't fall for women like her. Yet sometimes, she caught him looking at her with an expression that made her heart race, and she allowed herself to wonder. October brought a chill to the air and the need for preparations before winter set in. The ranch hands worked long hours bringing in the last of the hay and moving cattle to winter pastures. Martha and Eleanor preserved the garden's final offerings and stocked the root cellar with potatoes, carrots, and apples from the small orchard behind the house. It was during this busy time that word reached them of a harvest dance in Council Bluffs. Martha received the news from Mrs. Peterson, the storekeeper's wife, during their monthly supply run to town. "You all simply must come," Mrs. Peterson insisted, wrapping their purchases in brown paper. "The whole county will be there. It's at the new meeting hall next Saturday evening." "It's been ages since I've been to a dance," Martha mused as they loaded the wagon for the return journey. "What do you think, Eleanor? Might be nice to have an evening of fun before winter sets in." Eleanor's stomach nodded at the thought. "I don't dance," she said quickly. "Never learned how." "Nonsense. Anyone can dance, and it would do you good to meet some of the folks from town." Martha's eyes twinkled. "Maybe even some eligible young men." Eleanor's thoughts immediately went to Caleb, and she felt her cheeks warm. "I don't have anything suitable to wear," she protested. "We'll figure something out," Martha assured her, climbing onto the wagon seat. "I'm quite handy with a needle, you know." That evening at dinner, Martha broached the subject with Caleb. "The harvest dance is next Saturday," she announced, passing him the platter of roast beef. "I think we should all go." Caleb raised an eyebrow. "A dance? Martha, you know I have 2 left feet." "You dance just fine when you put your mind to it," his sister retorted. "Besides, Eleanor's never been to one. We can't deprive her of the experience." Eleanor stared at her plate, mortified. "Really, it's not necessary, it's settled," Martha declared. "I'll alter my blue dress for you. We're not so different in height, and there's plenty of material to work with." Caleb's gaze shifted to Eleanor, who still couldn't bring herself to look up. "Would you like to go?" he asked quietly. The gentleness in his voice made her finally meet his eyes. "I wouldn't know what to do," she admitted. A small smile tugged at his lips. "Neither do I half the time, but I'd be honored to escort you if you'd allow it." Eleanor's heart seemed to stop, then restart at double speed. "You would, of course," he said simply. Martha watched this exchange with undisguised delight. "Excellent. Now that's settled, who wants apple pie?" The days leading up to the dance were filled with preparations. True to her word, Martha altered her blue silk dress for Eleanor, letting out the seams and adding panels of complementary fabric to accommodate Eleanor's fuller figure. The result was surprisingly flattering, emphasizing her small waist and the creamy skin of her shoulders and neck. "You look beautiful," Martha declared the evening of the dance as Eleanor stared at herself in the mirror, hardly recognizing the young woman reflected there. Martha had styled her hair in an elegant updo with soft curls framing her face and lent her a pair of pearl earrings that had belonged to their mother. "Do you really think so?" Eleanor asked uncertainly. No one had ever called her beautiful before. "I know so," Martha said firmly. "Now come downstairs. Caleb is waiting and we don't want to be late." Caleb stood at the foot of the stairs, dressed in his Sunday best, a dark suit that emphasized his broad shoulders, a crisp white shirt, and a string tie. He turned at the sound of their approach, and Eleanor watched as his eyes widened, his lips parting slightly in surprise. "Eleanor," he breathed, "you look incredible." The naked admiration in his gaze sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with the October chill. "Thank you," she managed. "So do you." The ride to Council Bluffs was filled with Martha's cheerful chatter, but Eleanor was acutely aware of Caleb beside her, their shoulders occasionally brushing as the wagon hit bumps in the road. By the time they reached the meeting hall, her nerves were stretched tight as fiddle strings. The hall was transformed for the occasion, decorated with autumn leaves and golden lanterns. A small band played in one corner, and tables laden with food and drink lined the far wall. It seemed as though the entire county had turned out, the room buzzing with conversation and laughter. Eleanor hesitated at the entrance, suddenly overwhelmed. She had never been in such a large gathering, and she felt eyes turned toward her, assessing the newcomer. Instinctively, she shrank back. Caleb's hand found the small of her back, steadying her. "Remember," he murmured close to her ear, "you belong here as much as anyone." His confidence in her gave Eleanor the courage to step forward. Martha was quickly swept away by old friends, leaving Eleanor and Caleb to navigate the crowd together. He introduced her to neighbors and townsfolk, his hand never leaving her back, a warm, reassuring presence. To Eleanor's surprise, people were welcoming. Mrs. Peterson gushed over her dress. Sheriff Miller complimented the double G cheese he'd purchased at the general store, and several women invited her to join the quilting circle that met in town each month. "See," Caleb said as they helped themselves to punch. "Nothing to worry about." The band struck up a lively reel, and couples began to form on the dance floor. Eleanor watched with a mixture of envy and trepidation as they twirled and stepped in time to the music. "Shall we?" Caleb asked, extending his hand. Eleanor hesitated. "I told you I don't know how to dance." "And I told you I have 2 left feet," he reminded her with a smile. "We can be terrible together." How could she resist such an offer? Eleanor placed her hand in his and allowed him to lead her onto the floor. His arm went around her waist, holding her securely but respectfully as he guided her through the steps of the dance. Despite his claims, Caleb was far from terrible. He moved with the same fluid grace he showed on horseback, leading Eleanor through turns and steps with gentle pressure and murmured instructions. After her initial awkwardness, Eleanor found herself relaxing into the rhythm, following his lead and even laughing when she occasionally stumbled. "You're doing wonderfully," Caleb assured her as the music shifted to a waltz. This dance was slower, more intimate. Caleb drew her closer, his hand warm against the small of her back. Eleanor was vividly aware of every point of contact between them, his palm against hers, his arm around her waist, occasionally the brush of his chest against hers as they turned. "Everyone is staring," she whispered, noticing the glances cast their way. "Let them," Caleb replied, his voice low and earnest. "They're just admiring the most beautiful woman in the room." Eleanor's steps faltered as she searched his face for any sign of mockery, but found only sincerity in his blue eyes. "You shouldn't say such things," she protested weakly. "Why not if they're true?" His hand tightened slightly at her waist. "You are beautiful, Eleanor, inside and out." The world seemed to narrow to just the two of them, moving together in a bubble of music and golden light. Eleanor's heart pounded so hard she was certain he must feel it through the layers of fabric separating them. The spell was broken when someone called Caleb's name. He looked up, reluctantly releasing Eleanor as a group of ranchers approached, eager to discuss cattle prices and weather predictions. She slipped away, needing a moment to compose herself, and found a quiet corner near the refreshment table. "Eleanor Cooper, isn't it?" a feminine voice inquired. Eleanor turned to find a stylishly dressed woman about her own age regarding her with curiosity. "Yes, that's right." "I'm Vivian Blackwell," the woman introduced herself. "My father owns the bank in town." Her gaze traveled over Eleanor's dress, her figure, and back to her face. "You're staying at the Double G Ranch, I hear." "Yes, I work there," Eleanor confirmed, immediately defensive at the woman's assessing look. Vivian's perfectly arched eyebrows rose slightly. "Is that what they're calling it?" she murmured, just loud enough for Eleanor to hear. "You should know, dear, that Caleb Grant has been the most eligible bachelor in the county for years. Many have tried to catch his eye, including myself." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "He's being kind to you, of course. He's kind to everyone. but don't mistake kindness for something more substantial. Eleanor felt as though she'd been doused with cold water. I don't know what you're implying. I'm not implying anything, Vivian cut in smoothly. I'm simply saving you from potential embarrassment. A man like Caleb needs a certain kind of wife, someone who can manage social obligations, someone presentable. You understand. Before Eleanor could respond, Vivian glided away, leaving behind the scent of expensive perfume and the sting of cruel words. Eleanor stood frozen, Vivian's assessment echoing painfully in her mind. Of course the woman was right. What had she been thinking? That a man like Caleb could be genuinely interested in someone like her. It was absurd, a fantasy born of wishful thinking and his natural kindness. There you are, Martha appeared at her side, cheeks flushed from dancing. Are you enjoying yourself? I saw you dancing with Caleb earlier. Yes, it's lovely, Eleanor managed, forcing a smile, but I'm feeling a bit tired. Would you mind terribly if I stepped outside for some air? Martha's brow furrowed with concern. Of course not. Do you want company? No, thank you. I just need a moment. Eleanor made her way through the crowd and slipped outside. The night air was crisp, stars scattered like diamonds across the dark sky. She wrapped her arms around herself, trying to hold in the hurt that threatened to spill over. How foolish she'd been. Reading meaning into Caleb's everyday kindnesses, imagining romance in simple decency. He had taken her in out of compassion, nothing more. And while gratitude was appropriate, these feelings that had been growing inside her were not. Leaner, she stiffened at the sound of Caleb's voice behind her. Quickly, she wiped at her eyes before turning to face him. Is everything all right? He asked, moving closer, his face shadowed with concern. You disappeared so suddenly. I just needed some air, she said, striving for a lightness she didn't feel. It's rather warm inside. Caleb studied her face, seeing too much as he always did. Someone upset you. It wasn't a question, but Eleanor shook her head anyway. No, it's nothing like that. I'm just tired. He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the stubble on his jaw, smell the clean scent of soap and leather that always clung to him. Eleanor, please tell me what's wrong. The genuine concern in his voice nearly undid her. Why are you so kind to me? She blurted out. Caleb looked taken aback. What kind of question is that? A simple one. Eleanor wrapped her arms tighter around herself. Is it pity, charity? Because you found me crying by the road and felt sorry for me. Is that what you think? His voice was carefully controlled, but she could hear the hurt beneath it. I don't know what to think, she admitted. Someone just reminded me that a man like you couldn't. She couldn't finish the sentence. Understanding dawned in Caleb's eyes. Ah, someone shared their opinion on what kind of woman I should be interested in. His jaw tightened. Let me guess, Vivian Blackwell. Eleanor's surprise must have shown on her face because he nodded grimly. Vivian has been trying to secure a proposal from me for years, he explained. She considers herself entitled to it because her father has money and she's what passes for high society around here. He took another step closer. But Vivian Blackwell doesn't get to decide who I care about. Eleanor's heart stuttered. Care about? Caleb reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away and tucked a stray curl behind her ear. Eleanor, I didn't help you that day out of pity. I helped you because it was the right thing to do. But keeping you at the double G, that wasn't charity. That was selfishness on my part. Selfishness? She echoed, confused. I wanted you near me, he admitted, his voice rough with emotion. From that first day, there was something about you, your courage, your kindness, the way you never complained despite what had happened to you. I found myself making excuses to be around you, looking forward to meals just to hear your voice, watching you with the animals with Martha. He took a deep breath. I've been falling in love with you, Eleanor Cooper, a little more each day. Eleanor stared at him, certain she had misheard. "You can't mean that. I've never meant anything more." His hand cupped her cheek gently. "I know it hasn't been that long, and I don't expect you to feel the same way. But I need you to know that my feelings have nothing to do with pity or charity. They have everything to do with who you are." Tears welled in Eleanor's eyes, but they were different from the ones she had shed by the roadside months ago. "I thought I was imagining it," she whispered. "The way you looked at me sometimes, I never dreamed you could actually." "Love you," Caleb finished for her. "How could I not?" Eleanor closed her eyes, overwhelmed by his words, by the impossible reality that this man, this good, kind, handsome man, could see her, truly see her, and find her worthy of love. "May I kiss you, Eleanor?" he asked softly. She opened her eyes to find him watching her with such tenderness that it took her breath away. Unable to speak, she nodded. Caleb's lips met hers in a gentle kiss that nonetheless sent heat coursing through her body. His hands cradled her face as though she were precious, breakable. Eleanor's own hands came up to rest on his chest, feeling the strong, steady beat of his heart beneath her fingertips. When they finally parted, Caleb rested his forehead against hers. "I've been wanting to do that for weeks," he confessed. "So have I," Eleanor admitted, marveling at her own boldness. The sound of the meeting hall door opening caused them to step apart, though Caleb kept hold of Eleanor's hand. Martha emerged, shawl wrapped around her shoulders. "There you two are. I was beginning to worry." She took in their joined hands and flushed faces, a knowing smile spreading across her features. "Though perhaps I needn't have." "Martha," Caleb began, a hint of warning in his tone. "Don't Martha me," his sister replied cheerfully. "I've been watching you moon over Eleanor since the day you brought her home. It's about time you did something about it." She turned her smile on Eleanor. "He's a good man, though stubborn as a mule. You'll have your work cut out for you." Eleanor couldn't help but laugh, happiness bubbling up inside her like a spring. "I think I'm up to the challenge." Caleb squeezed her hand, his eyes alight with joy and promise. "What do you say we head home? I think we've had enough excitement for one night." The ride back to the Double G was filled with a different kind of energy than the journey to town had been. Martha dozed in the back of the wagon, while Eleanor sat close beside Caleb on the seat, their shoulders touching, their hands finding each other's in the darkness. The stars seemed brighter somehow, the night air sweeter. Eleanor looked up at the vast sky and silently thanked whatever twist of fate had led her family to abandon her on that dusty road, leading her to this man, this place, this unexpected happiness. As autumn deepened into winter, Eleanor's place at the Double G Ranch became more secure with each passing day. The small wage Caleb had initially promised her went largely unspent, accumulating in a tin box beneath her bed. She had little need for it. Martha ensured she had warm clothes for the approaching winter, and her basic needs were more than met by the ranch's bounty. Their courtship progressed with a sweetness that sometimes brought tears to Eleanor's eyes. Caleb was unfailingly respectful, never pushing for more than she was ready to give. Their stolen kisses in the barn or by the creek became treasured moments, each one building the foundation of something deep and lasting. Martha watched their blossoming relationship with undisguised delight, often making excuses to leave them alone together. "I'm not getting any younger," she reminded her brother one evening as she retired early. "I'd like to bounce a niece or nephew on my knee before my hair turns completely gray." Caleb had turned crimson at this comment, while Eleanor pretended sudden fascination with her mending. December brought the first heavy snowfall, transforming the prairie into a glittering white expanse. The work of the ranch slowed somewhat, though there were still animals to tend and repairs to make. The shorter days meant more evenings spent by the fire, with Caleb reading aloud from one of the books he ordered from back east, or Martha teaching Eleanor to knit. It was during one such evening, with Christmas just a week away, that a knock came at the door, an unusual occurrence given the weather and the late hour. Caleb frowned, setting aside his book. "Stay here," he instructed, reaching for the rifle kept near the door. Martha and Eleanor exchanged worried glances as he cautiously opened the door, rifle at the ready. "Who's there?" Caleb called. "Name's James Cooper," came the reply, carried on a gust of frigid air. "I'm looking for my daughter, Eleanor." Eleanor froze, the knitting needles slipping from her suddenly numb fingers. Her father's voice, after all these months, sent ice through her veins. Caleb's posture stiffened. He glanced back at Eleanor, whose face had drained of color, then back to the man on the porch. "What business do you have with Eleanor?" "She's my daughter," James Cooper repeated, his voice rough with cold or drink or both. "Got word in California she might be here. Let me in, man, it's freezing out here." Caleb hesitated, then stepped back, allowing the man to enter but keeping the rifle visible. James Cooper stumbled in, shaking snow from his coat. He was a thin, hard-faced man with Eleanor's green eyes but none of her warmth. His gaze found her immediately. "There you are, girl. Your mother's been worried sick." The blatant lie stung almost as much as the original abandonment. Eleanor rose slowly from her chair, Martha moving protectively to her side. "What are you doing here?" Eleanor asked, her voice steadier than she felt. James stomped his boots on the mat. "Is that any way to greet your father? We heard you'd found yourself a place here, doing well from the looks of it." His eyes traveled around the comfortable room, lingering on the Christmas decorations, the well-made furniture. "How did you find me?" Eleanor pressed. "Ran into the Johnsons in Sacramento. They'd heard from someone who passed through Council Bluffs that you were living at some ranch." He shrugged. "Took some asking around to find out which one." "Why would you look for me at all?" Eleanor couldn't keep the bitterness from her voice. "You made it very clear I wasn't wanted when you left me on that road." James had the grace to look uncomfortable. "That was a mistake. Your mother and we weren't thinking clearly. The journey was harder than we expected and money got tight." He cleared his throat. "But we're settled now, got a place outside Sacramento. Good land. Your mother sent me to bring you to us." Eleanor stared at her father in disbelief. After abandoning her to whatever fate might befall a young woman alone on the prairie, he expected her to simply forgive and forget. To follow him back to the family that had discarded her. "No," she said quietly. James blinked. "What did you say?" "I said no," Eleanor repeated more firmly this time. "I'm not going anywhere with you." Her father's face darkened. "Now you listen here, girl. You're still my daughter, still under my authority." "She's a grown woman," Caleb interrupted, moving to stand beside Eleanor. "And she's made her decision." James Cooper's eyes narrowed as he took in their proximity, the protective stance Caleb had adopted. "And who might you be, Caleb Grant?" "This is my ranch." His voice was level but carried an unmistakable warning. "I see," James said slowly. "So that's how it is. My daughter's found herself a protector." "I've found a home," Eleanor corrected, drawing strength from Caleb's presence. "And people who care about me, who see me as more than a burden." "We made a mistake," her father insisted. "We want to make it right." Eleanor shook her head. "It's too late for that. Please leave." "You heard her," Caleb said. "You can stay in town tonight. There's a hotel near the church. But then I suggest you start back to California." James Cooper looked from his daughter to Caleb, clearly assessing his options. Whatever he saw in Caleb's expression must have convinced him that pressing the issue would be unwise. "At least think about it," he said to Eleanor. "We're family, after all." "Family doesn't abandon each other," Martha interjected, speaking for the first time. "Family loves each other, flaws and all." James Cooper had no answer for that. With a final look at his daughter, he turned and stomped back out into the snowy night. As soon as the door closed behind him, Eleanor's composure crumbled. She began to shake, tears spilling down her cheeks. Caleb immediately gathered her into his arms, holding her close as sobs racked her body. "It's all right," he murmured into her hair. "You're safe. He can't make you go anywhere." Martha quietly slipped from the room, giving them privacy as Eleanor's grief poured out. All the hurt and rejection she had tried to bury over the past months surfaced at once, leaving her gasping for breath against Caleb's chest. "How could he?" she managed between sobs. "How could he just show up and expect me to go with him after what they did?" Caleb guided her to the sofa, sitting with her cradled against him. "Some people can't admit when they've done wrong," he said softly. "They twist things in their minds until they believe their actions were justified." "He didn't even apologize," Eleanor said, her tears subsiding to hiccups. "Not really." "No, he didn't." Caleb stroked her hair gently. "But Eleanor, listen to me. What they did, that was about them, not you. It was their failing, their weakness, never yours." She looked up at him, her face tear-streaked. "I know that now because of you, because you showed me what it means to be valued, to be loved." Caleb's expression softened, his eyes full of an emotion that made Eleanor's heart swell. "I do love you, Eleanor Cooper, with all my heart." "And I love you," she whispered back, the words feeling simultaneously momentous and completely natural. Caleb's hand came up to cup her cheek, his thumb brushing away a lingering tear. "I was going to wait until Christmas," he said, "but after tonight, I don't want to wait anymore." Eleanor's breath caught as Caleb shifted, reaching into his pocket to withdraw a small object. In the firelight, she could see it was a delicate gold band with a small pearl nestled in the center. "It was my mother's," Caleb explained. "Martha's been keeping it safe for me until I found the right woman to give it to." He took her hand in his eyes never leaving hers. "Eleanor Cooper, would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife?" For a moment, Eleanor couldn't speak, overwhelmed by the contrast between the morning she'd been abandoned on the road and this moment of perfect belonging. Then, through happy tears, she nodded. "Yes," she managed. "Yes, Caleb Grant, I will marry you." The ring slid onto her finger as though it had been made for her. Caleb's smile was radiant as he leaned down to seal their engagement with a kiss that promised a lifetime of love and acceptance. Christmas at the Double G Ranch that year was a celebration unlike any other. News of Eleanor and Caleb's engagement spread quickly through the county, and congratulations poured in from neighbors and townspeople alike. Even Sheriff Miller rode out through the snow to offer his best wishes and share a glass of Martha's famous eggnog. There was no further sign of James Cooper, though Eleanor found herself scanning the faces of travelers in town whenever she accompanied Martha or Caleb on errands. Part of her expected her father to make another attempt, but as the days passed with no word, she began to believe he had truly returned to California, accepting her decision. The wedding was set for spring, when travel would be easier for guests and the prairie would be in bloom. Martha threw herself into planning with enthusiasm, while Caleb began work on expanding the ranch house to give the newlyweds more privacy while still keeping the family together under one roof. Winter passed in a blur of happiness for Eleanor. The doubts that had plagued her early in her relationship with Caleb, that he might wake up one day and regret choosing someone like her, faded in the face of his consistent love and devotion. He never commented on her size except to admire her strength, or the softness that he claimed made her the perfect companion on cold winter nights. By the time April arrived, bringing with it the first wildflowers and warmer breezes, Eleanor had settled completely into her life at the Double G. Her skills with the dairy cows had expanded the ranch's offerings, with her cheeses now regularly sold at the general store in town. She had friends among the neighboring farms and ranches, women who valued her kindness and wit over her appearance. The wedding day dawned clear and mild, perfect weather for the ceremony that would take place in the meadow behind the ranch house. Martha had helped Eleanor create a wedding dress from fine cream-colored fabric ordered from Chicago, with lace trim and tiny pearl buttons that matched her engagement ring. "You look absolutely beautiful," Martha declared as she fastened the last button and arranged Eleanor's hair in an elegant style adorned with spring blossoms. "Caleb won't be able to speak when he sees you." Eleanor studied her reflection in the mirror, hardly recognizing the radiant young woman who looked back at her. Her cheeks were flushed with happiness, her green eyes bright, her golden brown hair gleaming in the sunlight that streamed through the window. "I never thought this day would come," she admitted softly. "Not for me." Martha squeezed her shoulders affectionately. "You deserve every bit of this happiness, Eleanor, and my brother is the luckiest man in Iowa." A knock at the door announced the arrival of Sheriff Miller, who had agreed to walk Eleanor down the aisle in the absence of her father. Eleanor had written to her mother after Christmas, extending an olive branch and an invitation to the wedding, but had received no reply. "Ready, Miss Cooper?" Sheriff Miller asked with a smile when Martha opened the door. "Everyone's waiting and the groom is looking mighty nervous." "As nervous as I feel," Eleanor asked with a small laugh. "Good nerves," the sheriff assured her. "The kind that come from wanting everything to be perfect for the woman you love." With Martha leading the way, Eleanor descended the stairs and stepped out into the sunshine. The meadow had been transformed for the occasion, with white chairs arranged in rows facing an arch of spring flowers where Reverend Phillips waited with Caleb at his side. The gathering was larger than Eleanor had expected. It seemed half the county had turned out to witness the union of Caleb Grant and the young woman he had rescued from the roadside less than a year before. As the small ensemble of musicians began to play, all faces turned toward her. But Eleanor saw only Caleb. He stood tall in his best suit, his hair neatly combed, his face a picture of awe as he watched her approach. The love in his eyes was so palpable it nearly took her breath away. Sheriff Miller placed her hand in Caleb's as they reached the flower arch, and Eleanor felt the slight tremor in his fingers that matched her own. "You're a vision," Caleb whispered, his voice rough with emotion. "Dearly beloved," Reverend Phillips began, "we are gathered here today to witness the union of Caleb James Grant and Eleanor Grace Cooper in holy matrimony." The ceremony passed in a blur for Eleanor, though she would always remember the sincerity in Caleb's voice as he recited his vows, promising to cherish and protect her all the days of his life. When it came her turn, she spoke from her heart, thanking him for seeing her true worth when others, including herself, had failed to do so. "By the power vested in me," Reverend Phillips concluded, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. Caleb, you may kiss your bride." The cheer that went up from the assembled guests as Caleb gathered Eleanor into his arms and kissed her with tender passion was deafening. As they turned to face their friends and neighbors as Mr. and Mrs. Grant for the first time, Eleanor caught sight of Martha wiping away happy tears. The celebration that followed lasted well into the evening, with tables laden with food, music for dancing, and enough good wishes to last a lifetime. As twilight descended, lanterns were lit around the perimeter of the meadow, casting a golden glow over the festivities. "Happy Mrs. Grant," Caleb murmured as they swayed together to a slow melody, his arms holding her close. "More than I ever dreamed possible," Eleanor replied, resting her head on his shoulder. "Thank you for finding me that day." "Thank you for staying," he countered, pressing a kiss to her temple. "For giving me a chance to love you." As the stars appeared overhead and the music played on, Eleanor reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. The road from abandonment to belonging had not always been easy, but each step had led her here, to this man, this life, this happiness that filled her heart to overflowing. In the years that followed, the story of how Caleb Grant found Eleanor Cooper crying by the roadside became something of a local legend, a tale of providence and second chances that people recounted with romantic sighs. But for Eleanor and Caleb, it was simply the beginning of their story, the first chapter in a life built on mutual respect, understanding, and abiding love. The Double G Ranch prospered under their joint care. Eleanor's dairy operation expanded, eventually supplying cheese and butter to establishments as far away as Omaha. Caleb's cattle business grew steadily, allowing them to purchase additional land and hire more hands. Martha remained with them, though she eventually moved into a smaller house built specially for her on the property, insisting the main house should belong to the growing family. For in the spring following their wedding, Eleanor discovered she was expecting their first child. Josephine Martha Grant arrived in the world on a snowy December night, with her father pacing anxiously outside the bedroom door and her Aunt Martha serving as midwife. She had Eleanor's green eyes and Caleb's determined chin, and from her first cry, she had both her parents wrapped around her tiny finger. 2 years later, she was joined by a brother, William James, a sturdy boy with a sunny disposition who would grow to be the spitting image of his father. And 3 years after that, the family welcomed another daughter, Emma Rose, who inherited her mother's golden brown hair and gentle nature. Through the challenges of raising children and running a ranch, through droughts and harsh winters, through moments of doubt and days of overwhelming joy, the love between Eleanor and Caleb only deepened. He never once gave her reason to doubt his devotion, and she blossomed under his unwavering appreciation, becoming a confident woman who was respected throughout the community for her kindness, wisdom, and business acumen. On their 10th wedding anniversary, as they sat on the porch watching their children play in the yard with the newest litter of puppies from their favorite ranch dog, Caleb took Eleanor's hand in his. "You ever think about that day?" he asked quietly. "The day we met?" Eleanor nodded, squeezing his fingers. "Often. It was the worst day of my life, and the best." Caleb brought her hand to his lips, kissing the gold band that had never left her finger. "I thank God every day that I rode down that road at that moment." "So do I," Eleanor replied, leaning her head on his shoulder as the setting sun painted the prairie in shades of gold and amber, much as it had on that fateful day when a kind cowboy found an obese girl crying by the road, and both their lives were changed forever. In the distance, their children's laughter rang out. A joyful melody carried on the prairie wind the sound of a future built on the foundation of an unexpected love that had proven stronger than prejudice, stronger than abandonment, stronger than doubt. A love that had given Eleanor Cooper Grant not just a home, but a place where she truly belonged.